Hey everybody, welcome back to Bethenaeum. My name is Ellie Marie and today I have a first of hopefully several monthly book reviews for you. So the first thing I would like to say is that it is very windy outside where I live, and since I film near a window, you can probably hear quite a bit of that in the background, and hopefully it won't be too distracting or too bad, but I want to go ahead and apologize for that and that I don't really have a better place in my house to film these. I'm sure I could find one, but for this video, I'm not super worried about it. So let's go ahead and get into the first book review that I will ever be doing for you guys. And I'm actually really excited about this because I'm somewhat new to book reviewing in a public sense. I'm really good at telling people I know what I think about a book that I have read, but I've never really done this in a public sort of form, either on my blog or on YouTube. So I'm really excited to kind of get into this and to see if I'm any good at it. So let's go ahead and do this. Today I will be reviewing A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, I believe is how to say her last name, Maas. I'm gonna assume it's Maas. It has 2 A's in it. And as you can see, I don't have a hard copy of this book. I read it in my Kindle app on my phone. I like to read books that way because I can carry them with me wherever I go without having to think about having a hard copy of a book with me. I do love owning hard copies of books, so oftentimes I find that if I really enjoy a book, I will go out and buy a hard copy of it just to own it, to put on my bookshelf and look at and make myself feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But in general, I do tend to read just digitally, not only because I can carry it with me, but also because if you have a library that's similar to mine, you can actually check out and rent digital book. And so that's why I have a digital copy instead of a hard copy to hold up for you. But I do have the cover on my phone, and so that works, and you guys can all kind of see until it's reflecting, sorry, on my light, but you can see what book it is that I'm going to be talking about today. Now, chances are several of you have already heard of this book. It is a very popular book series, and it is the first book in that book series, and so chances are most of you have already heard of it, if not read it. And so if you have differing opinions from me on this book, please feel free to comment them below. I'm happy to talk about it and discuss it with you. I do ask that if you are going to leave comments and that kind of thing, that you keep them civil, just because that's how I like to keep life, is civil. Not that any of my opinions on this book are going to be deeply polarizing. I don't really have any super strong feelings towards this book on either direction. And so hopefully there really won't be a lot of craziness in the comments. Not that a whole lot of people really watch my channel anyway. But let's go ahead and kind of dive into the book and what I think about it and see where it leads us. So, A Court of Thorns and Roses, in case you cannot tell just by the title, is a fantasy book. It is a fantasy book that's set in kind of an ambiguous time period and an ambiguous place. A lot of the concepts are myth concepts that connect to people groups that actually exist here in our world, but it's never really stated where exactly physically this place exists, outside of it being a fantasy place. There's this realm, this fairy realm, and there's a human realm in the book. In the human realm, from what I can tell, and I could be wrong, it's been a couple of weeks since I read this book, the human realm isn't really given like names, not really. It's kind of alluded to the idea that it could be like in Ireland, Scotland, England, Western Europe somewhere, but it's never really come out and said that that is the case. But to be honest, I think that works very well in favor of the book and in favor of the plot and how it feels. You don't find yourself focusing so much on whether or not these events are realistic, and you can just enjoy the plot because you're not really thinking about, well, did this take place in medieval England? Did this take place in, you know, Scotland when Mary Queen of Scots was around? Like, you don't really worry about that so much as you can focus on the plot. So let's go ahead and talk briefly about the plot. I'm not going to give away any major plot points because this is not a synopsis, this is a review. So the plot was pretty good. I actually really enjoyed the plot in this. I enjoyed the story part of this book. It's broken kind of into two sections. You kind of have this first section that's a bit slower moving, and where more of the romance part of the book is kind of developed and the relationships are developed, which is normal when you're writing a book. The relationships and all that kind of stuff tend to kind of come in the first chunk of the book. And I enjoyed that part of the book. While it was a touch slow moving, there were times when I had to tell myself, okay, you got to keep reading because this is good and you are enjoying it. Which isn't always good. That you need to remind yourself that you are enjoying a book. A book should be, a well-written book should be one that you have trouble putting down and that you keep going back to and you can't not read it. And so that's kind of weird and ambiguous of me. I know, I'm sorry, because I am saying that I enjoyed it. I did, I liked it. But there were times where it was slow moving enough that I had to remind myself that I liked it. And I had to say, okay, you're going to read for a little bit this evening. You have time. Read this book and not something else because you did like this book and you want to finish it. And so it was kind of odd to be in that place, to be in a place where I was like, you know, I do like this book. And while I'm reading it, I'm really enjoying it. But I have to remind myself when I'm not engaged with it that I like it, because it wasn't quick paced and it wasn't fast moving, and so it didn't really pull you in like something a little bit more quick would. But the second half of the book is very fast paced and is very quick moving, and while the first chunk of the book that was a little slower took me probably 2 weeks to get through between working and other stuff and not being able to just sit and read all day. It took me about 2 weeks to get through. The second part of the book only took me like 2 or 3 days because I wasn't having to remind myself, you like this book, you want to read this book. I did read the book. I read it at work on my lunch breaks. I would read it when I was sitting in offices waiting to see a doctor or something. I had a tooth pulled at one point, and so I spent a lot of time at the dentist. But because it was fast paced, I was eager to read it and I had trouble putting it down, and so that second part moved a lot faster. And either way, like I said, I liked the plot of the book. I enjoyed the story development, and there's actually a couple of story arcs within the story. It doesn't have one big arc. If you remember during our NaNoWriMo series, we talked about story arcs. It doesn't really have one big arc. It has a big arc that oversees the whole book, but then it's got a couple of smaller ones as well that fit with those two halves of the book, if you will. They're not really fully halves measurement wise, but they are two portions of the book. And so the first one kind of has its own little arc, and then the second one has its own little arc, and then there's this big arc that oversees the whole book. And so the second part of the book was much more quick paced and more actiony versus relationship building and character building. And with that, let's segue into the character building. There are a lot of relatable characters in this book series. For me, unfortunately, in the first book in this series, I'm actually reading through the other ones as I'm doing this. I'm in the middle of reading, I think the third one. I think I'm on the third one. The main characters in this book series, I had difficulty relating to. The primary character, the protagonist character of this series is female, and oftentimes I connect easier with females that are protagonists a lot because I'm a female. It just, I don't know, it just feels more natural to read from a female's perspective. But I really had a hard time connecting with her in this first book. Now that I'm into the other books, I understand why, and I don't really want to give a lot of it away, but the best way I can describe it without giving away big chunks of the plot is this first book, the protagonist, Feyre, I believe is how you pronounce her name, spends the entire book working towards becoming this thing that she becomes at the end of the first book. And then at the end of the first book, this thing that she becomes, and in that she changes, I mean, all characters change, this thing, the way she changes at the end of the first book sets the rest of the series, which is like another 3 books. And so this character that she was in this first book really doesn't pertain to the rest of the series. And you can kind of tell, you can kind of see that in how the author wrote this first book. The character that she is in the majority of this first book isn't super well developed. You understand her. She's very well spoken. She expresses very well. She's not unexpressive. She's just a little flat. And I know that chances are that really only happened because for the author, when you're writing a series of books, you tend to look at your characters for the long haul. The long haul. And so who your characters are before their big primary develop point, their big first primary develop point, isn't as important to you as an author as who they are afterwards, because that's who the series follows. And so this first book really is setting up this character for the rest of the series. But that means that this character and who they are for this book is kind of underdeveloped and therefore a little difficult to relate to. A lot of her emotional reactions seemed kind of flat and based, like just base, like they weren't super, they weren't how I would react, and they weren't how I feel a normal person, a human, would react to the situation she was put in. And which is fine. It's you know, Sarah J. Maas's book. She's more than allowed to write her character however she wants. But personally, I did have some trouble connecting with and engaging with that character. And that could also be part of why I had trouble getting into the first chunk of the book, because there wasn't any action. And so really I was just spending all my time with these characters that I didn't super connect with, and that I was interested in what happened to them, but not overly so. Not like I was with some of the other characters. So that's her protagonist. And then she has a secondary protagonist in this particular first book, and he also was kind of difficult to connect with. But I think that was on purpose. I think his character is supposed to be somewhat distant and somewhat cold and somewhat disconnected. And so while I didn't really connect with or resonate with her male protagonist character or secondary protagonist, I think that was on purpose. I think it was supposed to be that way, and I think he's supposed to be kind of distant feeling. And so, but because those were her 2 main characters and you didn't have this female character that I connected well with, I didn't really connect well with either of them. And so that made the first part where there's no action and it was mostly just spending time with these characters, I had difficulty with that. So while the characters are good and enjoyable, like I didn't have anything about these characters that I was like, oh my god, I hate that. I didn't connect with them super deeply. Even in the second part with the action stuff, I just really didn't connect with them really deeply. And I mean, now that I'm into the rest of the series, that's okay, because I've connected with them in other ways as the series has gone on, because they're a bit more well developed. But it just, that first book was just a little rough in the character development and in the connecting with the characters department. Before we move on from characters, there is one more thing that I wanted to point out that I have always felt is rather ridiculous. I am really, really big when you are naming characters and places in your stories. People need to be able to say them out loud. And if people cannot read them and say them out loud, then chances are you need to rename your characters or your places, because they're going to be very difficult to make emotional and mental connections with, which I did have trouble doing, because they can't say them out loud properly without having to look it up. And this is one thing that kind of bothered me about this. She has a pronunciation guide in the back of the book. And if your book needs a pronunciation guide in the back for characters' names, then you need to change their names. Or at least the spelling. You need to change the spelling of their name. Like, okay, the primary female character, her name is Feyre. F-E-Y-R-E. I don't know if this will focus or not. F-E-Y-R-E. Feyre. That one wasn't too bad. Once one of the characters said her name elongated and she was able to write it out, Feyre, then it made sense to me and I read it. Tamlin was the main male character. His name was easy. Tam and Lin. It was spelled just like you would expect. The big one that I had trouble with was Rhysand. And he's kind of a smaller character in this particular first book, but he's a big character in the next couple of books. And his name looks like it should be Rhysand. Which, come on, Rhysand, right there. Which is fine. Like, it's fine that his name reads differently than you would like it pronounced as the author. But to put a pronunciation guide in your book, it's a little pretentious. If you are going to be that particular about how people who read your book pronounce your characters' names, then pick names they can pronounce. Pick names they can read, and it reads and says just like it looks on the page. Don't put a pronunciation guide in your fantasy fiction book. I can understand putting a pronunciation guide in a history book where you have these places that were actually named that and people need to learn how to pronounce them. That makes sense to me. In a non-fiction sense, you need to be able to pronounce things. But when you are writing a fiction world and a fiction book, and especially fantasy, do not write names and then be super picky about how people pronounce it, to the point that you put a pronunciation guide in the back of your book. And so that was the biggest issue I had with this book. Even the little bit of disconnect I had in the first portion didn't bother me as much as having a pronunciation guide in the back of the book. Now, I could be totally off base with this. The pronunciation guide could have been from the publishers and not something the author really cared about. The pronunciation guide could have been added in after people talking about the book, because it got really popular, were just butchering the names, and whoever it is that publishes the book was like, we need to put something in here because people are just killing these names and it sounds atrocious. I could be totally off base in telling the author that she needs to change her names. It could be that she had nothing to do with putting this pronunciation guide in the back of the book. And if that's the case, awesome. You know, publishers do crazy things. We all know that. But it just, having the pronunciation guide in the back of the book bothered me a little bit. It just, maybe that's a sign that you need to change the spelling on some of your names. And names are the first thing that readers come into contact with your characters most of the time. And if they cannot read them and say them out loud, they will care less about your character almost immediately. And as an author, that is not what you want. And so that's one of my big takeaways from this book, is really, really try to make your characters relatable. And part of that is giving them names that people can read and say without requiring a pronunciation guide. All that being said, all of my review nonsense aside, I did really like this book. Obviously, because I'm reading the rest of the series. I will tell you that if you are interested in this series, this book so far is the hardest to get through. The other ones are much faster. They're much more action-y packed. The character development is a lot better. This one is just kind of, it's the setup. It's the setup for the rest of the series, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Most first books in a series are that way, but it's a little bit more difficult to connect with. So, but I do suggest it if you are interested in reading a fantasy series that's nice and long and has some really interesting plot lines. I really enjoyed the plot lines. Give it a go. Give it a try. This one's not super long. The second and third book in the series are pretty hefty, considering they're young adult fiction. They are big, but I like that. I like having a big book because I don't like it when my books end and I can't read more about these characters that I've come to adore. So, all that being said, I would give this book, I haven't come up with a rating system. We'll say I would give this book, what would I give this book? 8. I give this book 8 thumbs up out of 10. We'll do thumbs up. 8 thumbs up out of 10. It was good. I had a little trouble connecting with the first part, as I said, but nothing that I couldn't push through and get through, and nothing that kept me from really enjoying the second part. I had a little bit of trouble connecting with the primary character, but again, it wasn't in any way that really took away from the book. It didn't really take away from the enjoyment of reading it. So all in all, I would suggest it and I would read it if I were you, if you're looking for something to read. And I hope that you enjoyed this book review. Again, it's my first time doing this, so be gentle. Also, this video is going to be a little bit longer because I've been rambling for almost 25 minutes at this point. But as always, I would like to take this moment to ask you to subscribe if you would like to look forward to some more book reviews, or I will be presenting a poem later this month. If you like poems, I will be reading a poem. You can look forward to that. Or if you just want to see more content from me, please take this moment to subscribe and ring that little bell so that you get notifications when I update, which is every Tuesday and Friday. And I look forward to seeing you out there and to engaging with you on everything books, literature, reading, and writing. And as always, I appreciate your time and you. Bye.